Now you might know about Area 51, but this is Article 51. It says paragraph there, but it really should be subparagraph 23A. Let me just read it to you. The provision of maternity allowances, widows' pensions, child endowment, unemployment, pharmaceutical, sickness and benefits, medical and dental services, but not so as to authorise any form of civil conscription, benefits to students and family allowances. That bit about civil conscription, which you'll notice in inverted commas there, in brackets, was what Tony Abbott wanted to introduce on the 31st of March this year. He wanted civil conscription, but it's unconstitutional. You have a constitutional right to a welfare benefit. The problem is that the politicians are prepared to bend over backwards and ignore the Constitution to get you off benefits. Breaching is a term which was short for breach of contract. Now here's an interesting thing, also in the Constitution, paragraph 75. Now this is quite an interesting one. Original jurisdiction of the High Court in all matters in which the Commonwealth or a person suing or being sued on behalf of the Commonwealth is a party. Sued as in breach of contract. What for the last 23 years was known as breaching, and which is now called serious compliance failure. If the Department of Employment or Centrelink want to accuse you of breach of contract or serious compliance failure, which means the same thing, it's really a matter for the High Court. It is most definitely not a matter for Centrelink staff sitting at computers pushing keys. You have the right to have that heard in the High Court. So that's another constitutional right which is more honoured in the breach than the observer. So keep these things in mind. If you've been breached, you've been subjected to a reckless act of endangerment. Breaching legislation is unconstitutional. It's a violation of your human rights. A lot of people who work for Centrelink really do care. They're decent people. Some of them put their jobs on the line, their careers on the line. They risk being faced with fines or even going to jail for exposing the Howard government's enforcement of breaching quotas. In the financial year between the 1st of July 2000 and the 30th of June 2001 saw 346,078 people breached. That's about 3 per minute. Now that was a blatant rip-off, and if you were one of those people, you've been defrauded of legitimate welfare entitlements. You're entitled to restitution, you are entitled to compound interest, and you're entitled to compensation for any hardship suffered. And I know some people suffered real hardship because the only way they could survive was through survivor sex. Breaching was a humanitarian disaster. It was phased out on the 30th of June 2009, replaced with serious compliance failure penalties. It's another way of saying breaching. It's not really too constitutional either. The trouble is, you and I could not afford a High Court challenge. The only way we're going to get a High Court challenge is when people get together. So there's something I'd like you to do. That's my email address. breachresearch@gmail.com. If you know somebody who has been breached and suffered extreme hardship, or if you know someone, particularly if you know someone who was breached and then died, doesn't matter whether it was suicide, heart attack, stroke, whether they couldn't afford an asthma puffer and died of an asthma attack, those are breaching triggered deaths. There are lots of other ways people died. People forced out of their homes because they couldn't pay the rent and picked up diseases on the streets and died from those. As I say, it's 6,000 to 12,000 people. We may never know the true toll. But if we can start putting together collectively the names of people who died after being breached, then we can prove that breaching was a criminal act of reckless endangerment. Once that happens, anyone who's ever been breached has then got a legitimate right to apply for compensation. Now, I haven't been breached. I used to be a job club manager, and I was aware of CES staff who used to engage in breaching competitions. I used to be, for a brief while, a job network recruitment consultant. I worked in a job network agency, and I heard about some of my peers who were signing people up front, taking the $3,000 upfront fee and breaching their clients, so that guess what? They could sign up another client, take another $3,000, and so on. It was a massive rort. Centrelink stopped it with a ban on breaching, but no one who was defrauded of legitimate welfare entitlements was ever refunded. Centrelink would have had to pay massive amounts in compensation, so they kept it secret. If you've been breached, if you know someone who's been breached, then you have been deprived of your constitutional rights, your basic human rights, and you have been recklessly exposed to dangers which no person should be exposed to. I'm Ron Medlicott. Thank you very much for listening.